It's Giant Musties, and I just saw Kong Skull Island. My initial reaction is that critics overall seem to be a little too harsh on this movie. The number one complaint that most critics seem to have is that the characters are too bland. In my opinion, the problem is a lack of a lead character. There's so many characters that the movie tries to equally balance out that you never get attached to one specific character. However, that's not to say that the characters are completely worthless. Samuel L. Jackson brings enough anger and crazy emotions to keep you intrigued. And for kaiju fans, the backstory revolving around John Goodman's character will keep you thrilled. John Goodman himself does a great job presenting a character that has had his reality bubble bursted. While there isn't much to Tom Hiddleston's character, his first appearance establishes him as a tough guy that you can at least like, if not love. The rest of the characters are also a mixed bag. Brie Larson's character really doesn't have a reason to be there. I mean, there is a reason, but it's so thin that she might as well just randomly be there. John Reilly's character, however, does have a deeper backstory, and there's an underlying message regarding Reilly's character that reflects similar morals like those shown in older Godzilla movies. Reilly is not just a comic relief in this film. While speaking of the characters, I feel like that threw off the pace of the beginning part of this film. They seem to almost go through all the characters one by one, even just the minor supporting characters who you know are going to die. Even they get sort of a backstory, which doesn't quite pay off. But once we get past the introductions of the character, the film gets going, and it really doesn't stop throughout the rest of the film. Despite the flaws, I feel that the director brought plenty of the great monster energy and fan imagination that Gareth Edwards had with Godzilla. The island truly felt like a mystery, and there was multiple times in the film where I just didn't know what to expect, and it reminded me of watching the original Jurassic Park film for the first time, where anything could be anywhere out in the woods at any time. The monsters were all pretty well designed, and speaking of monsters, King Kong himself was a wonderful mix of the Toho King Kong and real-life ape behaviors. As a matter of fact, I feel that the emotions Kong displayed in this film will make it much easier for me to cheer for him whenever he faces off in Godzilla in 2020. Another complaint that some people are having is that Kong doesn't appear enough in this film. I don't know where they're getting that idea from. I even heard some critic review say that Kong only appears like 3 times in the movie. He's in there a lot more than that. I think it's the perfect amount. However, it almost feels excessive compared to Godzilla 2014, where Godzilla only appeared like for the second half of the movie in sporadic moments. This was like a constant pacing. It caught me off guard because I wasn't anticipating to see him this much. And the movie holds out really well considering how much action and CG, it hardly ever wavers. I think there's a brief moment in the beginning of the movie where some of the woodland creatures, I don't want to call them monsters, some of the life forms on the island, you can tell are a little bit CG, but they're not terrible CG. And like I said, the quality of the CG holds out the whole way to the end. And speaking of the end, that final battle is pretty epic. It's easily one of the longest final battles you'll ever see, or at least that's how I felt while I was watching it. It's perfect. Moving on to the soundtrack, I felt like it matched the tone pretty well. I wouldn't say that the orchestra pieces were as good as what we were treated to in Godzilla 2014 by Alexander Desplat, but the soundtrack delivered, except there was maybe 1 or 2 soft rock songs that became a little bit too much, like the movie was almost afraid to take itself seriously and it needed to lighten the tone up, but it was still used pretty well in transitional moments, or even the montage. And while I want to say that this movie shouldn't feel afraid to be a little darker in tone, I can't really say that because this movie was dark in tone, just not non-stop. It was kind of like a roller coaster. There was breaking moments and then it would just dive into something really dark and gory. This film, I don't know how it walked away with a PG-13 rating, but it was pretty vivid in the death scenes. Whereas Godzilla 2014 didn't really show too many people dying. Bryan Cranston's character died, but you really didn't see anybody dying. You just see people running for their lives out of the screenshot, and then a flood coming, and then you'd be like, okay, I guess they died. This movie's not afraid to show people being splattered and whatever else. Sure, it's nowhere near as gory as Logan, which is its current competition, but it's still pretty shocking compared to what I was expecting from Legendary at this point after having seen Godzilla. Finally, I just want to say that Samuel L. Jackson has some classic Samuel L. Jackson lines. Now, for the score, I want to do something different. I'm going to give 2 scores here. The first score is for the movie itself as a whole. As a movie, I can see why critics are giving this a 3 out of 5 on maybe average, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less. There are some flaws that you really can't look past, and that's mainly in the human characters. But if you're a kaiju fan, a hardcore one, and you've put up with some of the worst crappy films to come out of various countries all over the world, then there's nothing in this movie that you can't handle. And that's why the second score I want to give this as a monster movie is probably a 4 out of 5. Just because the pacing in the beginning throws you off a little bit. I'm Giant Muncies, and thanks for watching.